The old woman stood quietly at the marble counter, her trembling hands holding a small cloth purse while the bank manager looked at her as if she had no right to be there. Around her, wealthy customers waited in polished suits, phones in their hands, while employees hurried from desk to desk beneath the bright lights of Northridge Bank and Trust. The manager glanced at her worn sweater, faded scarf, and inexpensive handbag, then sighed impatiently. He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him was about to change his life forever. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness matters, that everyone deserves dignity, and that people deserve second chances, please like this video, share it with someone who needs this message, and subscribe to Echoes of Kindness. Your support helps us bring more stories of compassion, humility, and hope to people around the world. Her name was Margaret Whitmore, though nobody in the lobby knew it yet. She had arrived that morning without an appointment, walking slowly with the careful steps of someone who had learned not to trust her knees. Her gray hair was tucked beneath a patterned scarf, and her simple beige sweater looked as though it had been washed hundreds of times. She carried a small envelope containing several old documents and a handwritten note. She had come to the bank because she needed help accessing an account that had been untouched for years. It was not the money that frightened her. It was the memory attached to it. Years earlier, her husband Daniel had helped build the foundation of the financial institution that eventually became Northridge Bank and Trust. After his death, Margaret had stepped away from the business and quietly allowed others to manage what she had spent decades building. She had never cared much for attention. She believed a person's character mattered more than the size of their bank account. But the young manager behind the desk saw none of that. His name was Richard Hale, and he had spent the last 5 years climbing the corporate ladder. He wore an expensive navy suit, a perfect tie, and a confident smile that had slowly become something harder. That morning, he was already frustrated because a regional executive was visiting the branch, and Richard wanted everything to look flawless. When Margaret approached his desk and explained that she needed assistance, he barely looked at her papers. He asked whether she had an appointment. When she said she did not, his expression changed. He told her the bank was busy and suggested she speak to a teller. Margaret politely explained that the matter was important and that she had documents proving her connection to an old account. Richard looked at the worn envelope and then at her clothes. Instead of helping, he assumed she was confused. His voice became louder. He told her that she could not simply walk into a private bank and demand special treatment. Several customers turned toward them. Margaret's cheeks reddened, but she remained calm. She tried to explain that she was not asking for special treatment. She only wanted someone to look at the documents. Richard interrupted her and told an employee to direct her to the waiting area. When Margaret hesitated, he made the mistake that would haunt him for years. He told her that people like her often wasted employees' time because they did not understand how modern banking worked. The words fell across the lobby like a slap. Margaret lowered her eyes, gathered her papers, and quietly thanked him anyway. She had almost reached the door when an elderly security guard noticed the name written on one of her documents. He stared at it, then looked at Margaret again. His face changed completely. He hurried toward Richard and whispered something into his ear. Richard frowned and told him not to interfere. But the guard insisted. He pointed toward the document and explained that the signature belonged to Margaret Whitmore, the woman whose family trust still owned the controlling shares of Northridge Bank and Trust. Richard laughed at first. Then he took the document from the guard and read it carefully. His smile disappeared. He opened the bank's internal ownership records, searched the name, and froze. Margaret Whitmore was not merely connected to the bank. She was the principal beneficiary of the Whitmore Family Trust, which held the majority ownership stake. The bank's entire executive structure existed because her family had entrusted the institution to professional managers decades earlier. The regional executive Richard had been trying so desperately to impress was, in fact, scheduled to meet Margaret that very morning. She had deliberately arrived without an entourage because she wanted to see how ordinary customers were treated when nobody knew who she was. Richard rushed toward her, suddenly pale. He apologized repeatedly and offered to arrange a private office. But Margaret did not celebrate her power. She simply looked at him with tired eyes and asked one question: if she had been poor, would she have deserved less respect? Richard could not answer. For the first time in years, he saw himself through someone else's eyes. His expensive suit, impressive title, and polished reputation suddenly felt meaningless. Margaret did not fire him that day. Instead, she asked him to sit down. She told him that her husband had once said a bank was not truly successful because of how much money it held, but because of how people felt when they walked through its doors. She explained that her family had built the institution to serve people, not to make powerful people feel more powerful. Then she asked Richard to spend the next month working alongside the tellers and customer service staff, listening to ordinary customers and learning what dignity looked like from the other side of the counter. Richard accepted. At first, his pride fought him every morning. But slowly, something changed. He began noticing the elderly customer who came every Friday just to deposit a small pension check. He noticed the single mother who counted every dollar before paying a bill. He noticed the nervous teenager opening her first account. He discovered that every person walking through those doors carried a story that could not be measured by clothing, wealth, or appearance. Months later, Margaret returned to the bank. This time, Richard personally welcomed her, but she noticed something different. He also greeted everyone else with the same respect. A nervous young man approached the counter, an elderly woman struggled with paperwork, and a tired father asked for help understanding his account. Richard treated each of them with patience. Margaret watched silently, and for the first time, she smiled. Richard eventually became one of the bank's most respected leaders, but he never forgot the morning he humiliated a woman he believed was insignificant. Years afterward, he kept Margaret's handwritten note framed inside his office. It contained only one sentence: never measure a person's worth by what they appear to have. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in treating every person with dignity, and subscribe to Echoes of Kindness. Sometimes one small act of kindness can change a life, and sometimes one moment of humility can save a person from becoming someone they never wanted to be. And before you leave, comment, kindness has no price, if you believe every human being deserves respect, regardless of their wealth, clothing, age, or position. Because Margaret's greatest lesson was never about money, ownership, or power. It was about something far more valuable. The true measure of a person is not how they treat those who can reward them, but how they treat those who seemingly have nothing to offer in return. And on that unforgettable morning, a quiet old woman walked into a bank expecting nothing more than help, and walked out having reminded an entire institution what dignity truly means.